We're back to continue the deep dive into Final Fantasy X's official timeline. This time, we'll be looking at the period of time from 20 to 10 years ago. A lot of stuff worth mentioning happens during this time period. In previous videos, we covered Spira's history 3,000, 1,000, 850 years ago. There's a card to the playlist popping up on stream right now to watch those in case you missed any of those videos. Otherwise, there's a link to each video in the description. Without further ado, let us begin. Approximately 20 years ago. Internal discord intensifies within the Guado tribe. Jiskel prevents disunity in the Guado by banishing his wife and child to Baj. Back in Guado Salam, Jiskel Guado faces growing unrest among his people. The Guado, wary of change, are not exactly thrilled about the presence of a half-human hybrid in their ranks. Despite Jiskel's wisdom and dedication as their leader, the pressure to maintain unity forces him into a painful decision, exiling his wife and young son Seymour. It's a move that speaks less to his personal beliefs and more to the delicate balancing act of leadership in a society resistant to change. Jiskel's loyal retainer Trammell discreetly arranges for Seymour and his mother to be sent away to the remote island city of Baj, where a Yevonite temple still exists to this present day. Isolated from the Guado, Seymour begins training as a summoner, with his mother serving as his guardian. Though physically removed from Guado Salam, the weight of his exile and the expectations placed upon him would shape the course of his destiny. 18 years ago, Wakka begins playing blitzball. At just 5 years old, Wakka falls in love with blitzball, kicking off a lifelong obsession with the sport. Despite his dedication, however, his passion does little to change the fate of the Besaid Aurochs, who remained locked in their infamous losing streak. For Wakka, blitzball becomes less about victory and more about tradition, at least until the arrival of Tidus, who brings a spark of change to both the team and Wakka's outlook. Aware of her impending death, Seymour's mother travels to the Zanarkand ruins alongside her son and becomes the faith for Seymour's final Aeon Anima. Seymour refuses to accept his mother's power and returns to Baj. The distinction between a final Aeon and a regular Aeon is a little bit murky when it comes to Anima. Normally, the final summoning requires a deep personal bond, resulting in a guardian sacrificing themselves to become the summoner's ultimate weapon against sin. But with Seymour's mother, things didn't quite line up. She willingly offers herself, yet Seymour never actually completes the final summoning. Anima exists, but there's no evidence that it was ever used to fight sin. Nor do we see Seymour suffering the fate of previous summoners who successfully summoned a final Aeon. This raises some interesting questions. If Anima was meant to be a final Aeon, why does Seymour get to use it like a regular Aeon without dying himself? Could it be that the ritual was started but never completed? Or maybe since the nature of summoning is so tied to belief and perception, the memories we see later in the game, and which grant exposition on this topic, are shaped by Seymour's and his own mother's perspectives rather than the objective truth. It's one of those lingering mysteries in FF10's lore that doesn't have a clear-cut answer. Nevertheless, Seymour does not use the Aeon of his mother to battle sin, instead returning to Baj, where he continues to develop his corrupt views, spurred on by his mother's sacrifice. Seymour's mother knows of the mechanics of the final summoning through Jiskel. It is thought that the Guado possess their own records, which tell of sealed histories in fragments. Furthermore, it appears that Jiskel is aware of Seymour and his mother going to the Zanarkand ruins and privately supports it. Given that the Guado were separate from the Temple of Yevon for most of their history, it stands to reason that they would have their own records and oral traditions about the past. This makes it all the more frustrating that Guado Salam isn't explored in greater detail. The city's grand architecture and Jiskel's manor suggest a wealth of historical knowledge that the players never get access to. If we had the opportunity to read through books or documents in the palace, we could have gained a deeper understanding of the Guado's unique perspective on history. perhaps offering details that contrast with the dominant Yevonite versions of events. Regardless, it also stands to reason that Jyscal would approve of his wife and son making a noble sacrifice for the betterment of Spira, as it would likely be a way in which to further unify his people during the divisive period while he tried to bring them back into Yevon's flock. A priest from Bavel named Braska elopes with the younger sister of Cid of the Albed tribe. Forsaking the high echelons of the temple's hierarchy, where marriages are typically arranged with the Yevonite elite, Braska quietly rebels against tradition by falling in love with and marrying an Albed woman from a prominent family. His wife is none other than the sister of Cid, the future leader of the Albed. While Braska isn't outright excommunicated, he faces intense scrutiny and quiet ostracization for choosing love over the rigid expectations of Yevon's inner circle. His decision not only distances him from the temple's favor, but also foreshadows the unconventional path he will eventually take as a summoner. Braska becomes close to Cid's sister while visiting the Albed home to make contact with the Albed. After their marriage, Braska's career prospects are completely derailed for wedding a Yevon opposer. Likewise, Cid severs all ties with his sister. The Albed remain the only major faction in present-day Spira that openly rejects the temple's teachings, making Braska's union with Cid's unnamed sister a scandal on both sides. Braska's reputation with Yevon plummets, while his wife's ties to the Albed do little to shield her from scrutiny. Instead of bridging their worlds, their marriage leaves them both as outcasts. Braska, a fallen priest in the eyes of Yevon, and his wife, an Albed who married into the enemy's faith. 17 years ago, Titus is born to Jecht and his wife. Final Fantasy X really has a thing for leaving parents unnamed, huh? Even Titus's mother, who we actually see and interact with in flashbacks, remains just Mom. Despite her lack of identity, her role in Titus's backstory is significant. Titus is born in Dreams Anarchand 17 years before the events of the game, growing up under the shadow of his distant, overbearing father, Jecht, while his mother's attention remains fixated on her husband rather than her son. Since we know Titus is based on the memory of Shuyin from FF10-2, and that Dreams Anarchand itself is a construct maintained by the Faith on Mount Gagazet, the question arises, how exactly does time function there? Is it a perfect recreation of the Zanarkand that once was, replaying the same events on an endless loop? Or does it evolve and degrade in some way over the centuries, with the Faith's memories fading and being filled in with new details? This could explain why Titus isn't simply named Shuyin, and instead exists as his own person, shaped by a world that may not be a flawless copy, but a dream slowly shifting over time. Titus's experience on Mount Gagazet raises even more questions about how Dreams Anarchand functions. When he briefly returns, he isn't reliving a single moment, but seemingly jumping around his own past, observing himself at different stages in life. This suggests that Dreams Anarchand isn't a linear recreation of the past, but something more fluid, possibly shaped by the perceptions of the Faith maintaining it. Of course, since he's interacting with the Faith directly, rather than physically returning, it's also possible that what he sees isn't Dreams Anarchand itself, but rather fragments of its memory, highlighting just how little we truly understand about its mechanics. Yuna is born to Braska and Cid's sister. Yevonite heretic Braska and the so-called traitorous Albed, Cid's sister, also have a child, Yuna. Her heterochromatic eyes, one green and one blue, serve as a subtle marker of her mixed heritage, as Albed are known for their striking green, spiral-patterned irises. And speaking of those distinctive eyes, FF10 2.5 drops an interesting bit of lore. Turns out, the Albed's eye color and scrambled speech aren't natural traits, but the result of an ancient spell cast on the Beedall people. The magic elite of old really had it out for them, branding them as outcasts for their use of Machina, even while those same elites eagerly turned that very technology against one another in a war. Anyway, 13 years ago, while heading to the Albed home by ship, Yuna's mother is killed by Sin. Braska makes a firm decision to become a summoner. With nowhere to turn in Yevonite society, Braska and his wife set their sights on Beacon L Island, hoping the Al Bhed would take them in. But tragedy strikes before they ever reach their destination. Sin attacks their ship, claiming Yuna's mother in the chaos. Heartbroken and stripped of the life he had tried to build, Braska makes a solemn vow. He will become a summoner, not just to seek purpose in his grief, but to ensure his daughter never suffers the same fate. If the only way to protect Yuna is to bring about the calm, then he will see it done. 10 years ago, Waka joins the Besaid Aurochs. At just 13, after 8 years of dedicated blitzball practice, Waka finally joins the Besaid Aurochs. Unfortunately, his addition does little to break their infamous losing streak. Another decade would pass before they'd taste victory. That is, assuming you played well enough during that crucial tournament match. No pressure. While out training for blitzball at sea, Jack touches the fifth sin and is transported to Spira. Out at sea, Jack hones his skills in Dream's Anarchand, unaware that his life is about to change forever. When Sin drifts too close, Jack, ever the curious type, makes the mistake of touching it. That single moment is all it takes. As Ifrit explains when Jack touches Sin, he became real. Sin's overwhelming gravity magic tears him from the dream and pulls him into the modern Spira, making him the first person to ever cross the boundary between the two worlds. The warrior monk Orin becomes the guardian of Summoner Braska. Braska also makes Jack, who is imprisoned in Bavel, his newest guardian, and the three leave on a pilgrimage to obtain the final summoning. The most unlikely band of misfits sets out on a summoner's pilgrimage. Braska, the disgraced priest turned summoner, Orin, the steadfast warrior monk with unshakable principles, and Jack, the loud-mouthed drunkard who ended up in a Bavel jail for raving about being a star player of the Zanarkand Apes. A shame we never got a prequel chronicling their journey. Square Enix, if a full game is too much to ask, how about a short scenario letting us step into their boots, just for a little while? Come on, you know we'd eat that up. Think about it, you could do a whole bunch of short games like this. Take our money. Anywho. Summoner Braska defeats Sin using Jack as the Faith for his final summoning, and becomes a High Summoner. We all know how this three-way bromance story ends. Braska completes his pilgrimage, defeating Sin by using Jack as the Faith for his final summoning. In doing so, both Braska and Jack make the ultimate sacrifice. Braska is immortalized as the fifth High Summoner, his victory ushering in another calm, while Jack's fate is far more tragic, bound to the endless cycle of Sin's rebirth. Orin challenges Yunalesca by himself and is mortally wounded. Blinded by grief and fury, Orin storms Zanarkand's dome, determined to put an end to Yunalesca and the brutal cycle of sacrifice. But alone, he is no match for the ancient unsent summoner. Overwhelmed, he suffers a fatal wound, his body left broken and dying at the steps of Zanarkand's ruins. Yet even death cannot stop him. His sheer will keeps him tethered to Spira, setting the stage for his return years later. Kamari's horn is broken by Biran, and he leaves Gagazet, unable to bear the shame. Humiliated and cast out, Kamari chooses exile over living in the shadow of his defeat, with his broken horn serving as a constant reminder for his perceived weakness. He wanders the world beyond Mount Gagazet, seeking purpose in a land where strength is everything. His journey will eventually lead him to the most important vow of his life, one that will shape the course of Spira's future. And yeah, even though Kamari is still a beast of a warrior by human standards, among the Ronzo he's treated as weak, especially by Biran and Yankee, who constantly belittle him. It really drives home how the Ronzo's culture is built around sheer physical prowess, and if you don't measure up, you're an outcast. A dying Orin entrusts Yuna to Kamari on the outskirts of Bavel and then passes away. He becomes an unsent. This moment not only ties Kamari into Yuna's story, but also gives deeper meaning to his silent loyalty. Orin, barely clinging to life, sees in the young Ronzo a protector strong enough to carry out his final duty. With no grand speeches or elaborate rituals, just a few desperate words, Kamari's path is forever changed. He accepts the responsibility without question, setting him on a journey that will define his existence, one where he will stand as Yuna's silent guardian, just as Orin had sworn to be. Meanwhile, Orin fades from this world as he becomes unsent. What's interesting is how Kimahri turns the rejection of his society into loyalty of another kind. Instead of staying and proving himself to his tribe, he leaves and dedicates his life to protecting Yuna. It's a classic case of finding your own strength outside of the expectations forced on you. Do you think Kimahri would have eventually earned the respect of his tribe had he stayed, or was leaving the only way for him to truly grow? With the arrival of the calm, the Guado's internal discord subsides. Following that trend, Seymour's exile is revoked. He returns to Guado Salam and assists his father as a priest. Braska's calm not only brings a temporary peace to Spira, but also eases the tensions within the Guado. With Sin temporarily gone, the teachings of Yevon seem more credible than ever, offering the Guado a sense of stability. Jiskel's vision for unity gains traction, and the once skeptical traditionalists begin to embrace Yevon's doctrine. The shift paves the way for Seymour's return from Baj, no longer an outcast, but a symbol of his father's ambitions. At Jiskel's urging, Seymour steps into the role of a Yevonite priest in Guado Salam, setting the stage for his eventual rise to power. Kimahri brings Yuna to Besaid village. Kimahri honors his promise to Orin, becoming Yuna's steadfast guardian. Carrying the orphaned girl away from Bavel's political and religious machinations, he journeys across Spira to the remote island of Besaid. There, Yuna finds a new family among Waka, Lulu, and Chapu, growing up under their care and forming bonds that would later shape her fateful journey as a summoner. Orin rides Jecht's Sin to Dream Zanarkand and begins to watch over Tidus. Now an unsent spirit, Orin has fulfilled his promise to Braska, but one vow remains, the one he made to Jecht. Determined to watch over Jecht's son, Orin seizes the rare opportunity his undead state affords him. Using the new Sin, now fueled by Jecht's final Aeon as a passageway, he journeys to Dream Zanarkand. There he spends the next 10 years as a silent guardian and reluctant mentor to young Tidus, preparing him for the journey that lies ahead. In the final part of this video series, we will be covering the history of Spira from 10 years ago until the start of the game. That one's gonna be another doozy when it comes out. But until then, check out some of the videos popping up on screen right now.